Hello and welcome to this week's YouTube video. Sometimes the painting tells you very early on that your usual way of working isn't going to cut it. That's exactly what happened with this ginger cat. What I expected to be a straightforward Allaprima study turned into a decision about whether to fight through it or change approach entirely, and it ended up being a really important reminder about flexibility in painting. In today's video, I'm going to talk through the issues I had with this painting and the solutions I took to fix them. Let's jump straight in. Number 1, what is Allaprima and why use it? Before I get into the cat, I want to explain what Allaprima actually means, because it is a term that gets used a lot and not everyone is familiar with it. Allaprima is an Italian term that simply means at first attempt. It is a way of painting where you complete the whole painting in one go, wet paint into wet paint, without waiting for the layers to dry. Everything is mixed and resolved on the canvas in real time. You are making decisions about colour, temperature, edges and texture all at once, and the painting either works or it doesn't. It is the way I naturally work, and there are things about it that I really love. There is a freshness and spontaneity to Allaprima painting that is very hard to achieve any other way, because you are mixing wet into wet. Edges are soft and painterly. Colours blend naturally on the canvas, and the whole painting has a liveliness and energy that layered painting can sometimes struggle to replicate. But, and this is the point of today's video, Allaprima is not the right tool for every job, and this ginger cat is an example of that. Knowing when your default approach is working for you and when it is working against you is one of those important skills that takes time to develop. And today I want to share why I needed to change tack with this painting. Number 2, why this cat was different. On the surface, this painting looked no different from my other paintings. However, let me explain why it wasn't. The first issue was the scale, 8 by 8 inches. Whilst I paint this size all the time for my commissions, this one featured the whole cat, so I was immediately working on a very small scale. This meant every part of the cat had to be resolved within a very small area. There was very little room to manoeuvre. The second challenge was the colour. The cat was entirely ginger. There was no strong colour contrast to work with, no dark markings, no variety in hue. The whole painting was sitting within a very narrow, warm colour range. The third challenge was the fur. This was a fluffy cat, and the fur was very textured without obvious detail of the cat's limbs. And the fourth challenge was the temperature shifts, because even though the cat was all one colour, the temperature variations within that ginger were really subtle. All 4 of those together made it very hard for me to paint it all Allaprima, and I did try, but I had to change direction 3/4 of the way through. Number 3, why scale changed everything. The point about working Allaprima is that your strokes are broad and loose. It is very hard to do this on such a small scale where the strokes feel clumsier and overscaled, and it's much easier to lose control of your painting. On a small canvas, every mark is significant. There is no room for a loose gestural stroke to resolve itself because there simply isn't enough canvas for it to land on. Every single mark has to be considered and placed with precision. A palette knife is one solution for building texture on a small painting, but on an 8 by 8 with a fluffy cat, it was never going to work for me. I have dyspraxia and can be a little clumsy sometimes. Broad wet strokes into wet strokes are equally difficult, even with no medium. You are trying to describe subtle fur texture in a very small area, and every stroke you make is affecting too much of the painting at once. It is very easy to knock out my drawing with a single brush stroke. The lesson here is simple but really useful. Before you start any painting, consider the scale and ask yourself whether your usual technique is appropriate for that size. In this instant, it just wasn't going to work. Number 4, the problem with wet into wet texture. Allaprima relies on wet paint, and wet paint moves. When you are trying to build a very specific texture like dense, fluffy fur, it becomes really hard to achieve on such a small scale. The other problem is temperature. This cat had very subtle temperature shifts within the ginger fur. Warm ochre in the light, slightly cooler across this area. Plus the feet and legs were very much suggested in the photo, so I had to paint them that way. On a small canvas with very subtle shifts, wet into wet merges those temperatures together before you can assess them properly. You put down a cooler mix next to a warmer one, and within seconds they have blended into each other and the shift is lost. You either end up overworking the painting trying to recover what you have lost, or it turns into mud. The painting was telling me very clearly that it needed a different approach, and the moment I accepted that and changed tack, everything became easier. Number 5, the solution, layering. This is what I did instead, because once I accepted that Allaprima wasn't working, the solution actually became quite clear. The approach I moved to was layering, and specifically a combination of underpainting base layer followed by an overpainting with no medium. The first step was to paint an average value and temperature across the part of the cat. Not trying to resolve anything, not trying to describe texture, just establishing the broad colour relationships. This base layer is essentially a map of the painting. Where are the warm areas? Where are the cool areas? Where are the lights and where are the darks? Nothing is finished, everything is approximate. And then once that layer is dry, you have a stable surface to work on, and you are no longer fighting wet paint underneath every mark you make. Using no medium, I began to adjust my values and temperatures, and the paint I added over the top gave me stronger edges to suggest that furry effect. This approach made this painting much more manageable. How often would I use this approach? When I am obviously fighting with a wet painting, and hard edges will not be an issue. Usually the painting will have a very narrow value range and temperature shift. Also, the scale will present me with an issue too. Number 6, let the painting tell you what it needs. I want to finish with the bigger lesson sitting underneath all of this, because I think it is more important than any of the technical points I have made today. Rules in painting are really not rules at all. They are solutions that worked for someone in a specific situation and got passed down as advice. Allaprima is a beautiful way to paint, but it is not the only way, and it is not always the right way. The most important skill you can develop as a painter is the ability to read what a painting is asking for and have the flexibility and the confidence to respond to that honestly. This is harder than it sounds because we all have our default approaches, our comfort zones, our go-to techniques, and there is nothing wrong with that. Default exists because they work most of the time, but when your default is fighting you, when the painting is not responding the way you expect, the worst thing you can do is keep pushing harder with the same approach. Step back, look honestly at what is not working and ask yourself why. In this case, the answer was scale, texture and subtle temperature shifts, and once I understood that, the solution was obvious. I have been painting for a long time and have many videos on this channel. You will find lots of ways to paint the same subject matter. Learning different approaches will really help you when you get stuck. So whatever level you are at, give yourself permission to break your own rules when the painting asks for it. Your technique should always serve the painting, never the other way around. If you would like to come and paint with me in oils, join my workshop on the 3rd of July. You'll find the link in the description below. There are also more details of lesson opportunities on my website sarahhallidayart.com. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss future painting tips. Thank you for watching and see you next week.